Mhm.
So Anna, alternative plants. It's a very intriguing name. What could be alternative to plants? So maybe one of the things that we should start with is the description of alternative plants in your own words for our audience.
So, in general, Alternative Plants is a biotech company that uses not plants as we grow them or harvest in nature, but we use plant stem cells. And we use plant stem cells to produce bioactive compounds. Why alternative plants? Because this is an alternative to taking plants from the nature, harvesting them, or farming them. And why we came up with this word alternative is because before we established the company, we worked as service providers and consultants for cosmetic companies locally here in Baltic states. And what we saw that there are several challenges that they are facing. And they're looking for alternatives. And one thing is that the plants that are widely used, there's still issues with consistency. So the quality may vary from one supplier to another. There might be some pollutants. The season affects it. So one season you get a very nice harvest high with bioactive compounds, and the other season the chemical composition is slightly different, and it all affects the end product's quality. And the other thing, there are medicinal plants that are very interesting for the cosmetic industry, but they are inaccessible to the industry because they're very difficult to grow, or some of them are even rare and endangered, or they produce very small quantities of the compounds we're interested in. So we came up with an alternative, an alternative way how to produce those natural compounds using biotechnology.
That makes sense. And I think that explains the name also. And one of the questions, just out of curiosity, that comes up in my mind is why was it difficult to do this, or maybe follow the same methodology that you guys are using right now before alternative plants came? I mean, did nobody think about it?
Uh, uh, no, there were some cases in the industry. There is a growing number of ingredients that are produced using plant stem cell technology. So we're not the only ones, but I see the positive side of that. So on one hand, we might look at those other companies and other scientific institutions as competitors. But the other thing is that the field is very new and evolving. So we're kind of building an ecosystem because there are still a lot of elements lacking. So it's knowledge and scale up. So also equipment, because the plant cells, they require a different kind of bioreactors, and there might be variations between one cell line and another cell line. So there had been previously a research, scientific studies before we started that the concept has been tested. So there were the first products on the market already, ingredients from the plant stem cells. But our focus was on specific plant species, and we mainly focused on the plants that are from the Northern Europe, from all the Nordic medicinal plants that they're very interesting, that they live in a very harsh environment. So there is less sunlight. Several plants grow on the seaside, but there is high salt concentrations. In the summer, there is high ultraviolet light radiation. In winter, it's completely dark all the time. So they have to preserve themselves to bloom in the next season. And to do all that, throughout the evolution, plants have developed different kind of mechanisms how to protect themselves. And studying those compounds that plants are producing, we saw that those could be applied in cosmetic industry and maybe later in food and pharma industry as well, because they act as a very strong antioxidants, anti-inflammatory molecules, and as well as regenerative compounds, antimicrobials as well. Because as I always tell to my colleagues and other people from the industry, we have to look at the plant. The plant is the unique organism that where it grows, it has to grow there. Plants do not have any option to run away from harsh conditions.
Yes.
Instead, they have to develop their ways how to cope with those harsh environments. And they do that by developing and synthesizing various kinds of secondary metabolites. And those secondary metabolites are very interesting to use for skincare applications and in other human health applications, actually. So we saw that there is a perspective in the technology, there were already products on the market. So we're not like absolute pioneers in this field, definitely. And that would be very difficult to do that, being the very,
Yeah.
very first one. But we saw that there are plant species and plant cell lines that we clearly saw the benefit of developing those cell lines, because there are those plants that are interesting, but they're very difficult to use at industrial scale. We cannot grow them. They are even endangered, where their habitats are being destructed. So that's how we also contribute, like preserving those resources, not putting a burden on the biodiversity and natural habitats, but just taking this tiny sample, and from that sample establishing a cell line and using that to provide affordable, accessible ingredients to the industry.
Understood. And I think that's a very synergistic way to do it because, the science and tech part that you explained just now makes all sense. Now, you also
Mm-hmm.
mentioned the affordable and the accessibility part. Now, before I go to that question, I wanted to ask you, now you have the tech, you have the science behind it, you have the reasons, you also have the motivation from a sustainability perspective, from an eco-friendliness perspective. How do you take this and then pitch to somebody who may use this? Say, for example, large cosmetics organizations, or say, for example, even big pharmas who may need
Mm-hmm.
some APIs to actually use their medicinal properties. So, did you find that difficult? How was taking your science to the industry?
I think the science behind the technology and behind the ingredients, it's becoming more and more understandable, and the industry actually understands the science behind that. There are still, we know that other companies working in this field, there are still several issues with scalability.
Mm-hmm.
And it's mainly because we cannot use like universal protocols for scaling. Each cell
Yeah.
line is slightly different and requires a slightly different protocol. But still, what I want to emphasize that how we pitch it to to companies who might use them, and there are companies already using our ingredients,
Mm-hmm.
is that first of all we explain the technology, we explain the sustainability benefits, we explain that we're not putting burden on the natural habitats. This is a way how we can access some resources that are inaccessible to industry. The other thing is we put a lot of emphasis on characterizing our ingredients. We fully characterize the chemical composition because we're not isolating single compounds, though most of our ingredients are mixtures of plant secondary metabolites. And then we go further, we test the bioactivity. And that's actually one of our selling points, that we provide to our partners and customers, not only kilograms or liters of an ingredient, but along with the ingredient, we provide efficacy claims. And those efficacy claims have been tested. Like, for example, we usually start with, when we have a cell line, we characterize the chemical composition. We look what kind of compounds are there, what we already know about the compounds, what might be
Mm-hmm.
the synergies between different compounds in the mixture. And then not only like speculating about that, but we move to the laboratory and we do actual tests. We in-house, we have developed the competencies to do in vitro testing. That means we use skin tissues, we use skin cells, we use pigment cells, immune cells to test various effects, how actually the ingredient works, how effective it is. And then we can provide data in what kind of applications those ingredients could be effectively used.
Understood. And that's a very interesting point because I think valorization of science, the efficacy claims is what ultimately translates into marketing for
Yeah,
cosmetics companies. And
sure.
if you provide that, I believe, they're getting the USP along with the real deal.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the questions that came to my mind is, you mentioned about the in-house capability of characterizations, testing the efficacy
Mm-hmm.
on skin tissue, so on and so forth. And this data be directly submitted into regulatory authority bodies also?
Mm-hmm.
Can this research be directly supplied to them? Because one of the things that talking to other cosmetic startups was they faced hurdles whenever they introduced new components, new ingredients from the
Mm-hmm.
regulatory side of things. And not just in Europe, but US too. And it's a time consuming process to actually take that through the regulatory process
Mm-hmm.
and get it approved. And that
Mm-hmm.
also is something that makes the cosmetics industries say that, hey, get the regulatory approval. That's when we will actually take your product or ingredient as compared to trying
Mm-hmm.
it out and we taking it to the regulatory path. Again,
Mm-hmm.
just asking your opinion. What's the
Mm-hmm.
situation on your side?
Uh, yeah, I think the regulatory burden I say it's slightly increasing in cosmetic industry as well, but on the other hand, that's for the benefit of end users, for the customers, and we clearly understand that the safety issues they're on top of the table, and it's totally understandable. And we also want our ingredients to be proven how they work and are they safe. So what we do and what is our approach? So we perform some of the safety assays, some of the safety tests in-house, as well as cytotoxicity, phototoxicity, but we do those tests according to well-established guidelines, testing guidelines, the following the standardized protocol. Of course, to meet all the regulatory requirements, we also subcontract some of the studies and analyses to certified laboratories. Like, for example, in European Union, it's mandatory to evaluate the if there are some risks of allergen presence. So, of course, we send it to certified external laboratories for a test and get the report, and then we can show to regulators and our customers that we have tested this. The other ring is heavy metals, then the dermatological testing. We don't do any dermatological testing ourselves. So the safety testing, like patch tests, repeated patch tests, we do them in the groups of sensitive individuals to exclude any issues that for the sensitive skin there might be some irritation, and the repeated and cell tests in dermatological studies are conducted to exclude any like sensitization risks or allergy risks. So if we see them, then we can look how can we improve the product, or we can already like say that this cannot be used in a product for sensitive skin. So, but currently all the products we have tested, they can be used for people with sensitive skin as well. So, of course, there are a long list of tests that we outsource and external certified laboratories are performing them to meet the regulatory needs. But I think at least in Europe, it's the industry is quite flexible. And once there was also a case like the allergens regulation changed, there were a list of allergens added, what needs to be tested. So, but the laboratories that work and do those tests for regulatory like substantiation of the product safety, they moved very quickly. They updated their testing protocols. They're capable to do it. So it's the industry is quite flexible and able to adapt to the new regulations. So just to say shortly, so what we do a part of the tests in-house, and usually we do all the primary screening in-house. We have just to exclude if we see some risks, and we discontinue with that kind of extract or ingredient. And then we move forward with, when we have the finalized product form, we move on forward with working with external certified laboratories as well.
Understood. That makes sense. There was something interesting that you mentioned when you were talking about the plants in the Nordic areas. And you were mentioning the harsh conditions, you were mentioning their survival mechanisms and the compounds that they produce. Is there a compound that you found to be very, very interesting that people don't know about and our audiences would like to?
Yes, we have from one shrub. We have, I think it's in compounds that the customers, the consumers are not very aware of. Like the chemists and biochemists and biologists, they have heard of them, I know them, but like there is a cell line, we found a very interesting composition of terpenes and phenolics that are found in carnivorous plants only, but we are capable. The beauty is that there are several plant species that produce such compounds, but in nature they produce at very small concentrations. So a lot of resources are needed to extract those amounts that are interesting for the industry. So the beauty is that with cell lines, we can play with cultivation conditions. So we can increase the light, we can decrease, we can put in UV stress, salt stress, and etc. And by tailoring the growth conditions, we can boost put cells under stress, and they produce more those protective molecules. And what we found that this combination has very strong anti-inflammatory activities. And now we're also looking on top of the anti-inflammatory activities. They have the capability to regulate melanin synthesis. And what's the most interesting about that is that there are due to microinflammation. So after acne, after sunburns, there are some problems with skin pigmentation. There is uneven skin pigmentation. So putting together anti-inflammatory activity and the melanin synthesis regulating activity, we're now targeting like the aging spots or the uneven complexion that is caused by some skin inflammation, sunburn, and etc. So it's something interesting, and it's a novel combination of some compounds that are very specific and that are produced at very low concentrations in the nature, but we reach a level where we can produce in high concentrations. And again, in those biological tests, we found that this combination has those very specific bioactivities.
I mean, that's very, very interesting. I think the last time I heard about terpenes was when I was working on a study related to cannabinoids. And
Yeah.
and then that's where I actually got introduced to terpenes. And I mean, people told me, the researchers who were working on the other side, they told me that it's like the new gold, terpenes. I mean, it's something which is very, very rare. It's something that has a lot of medicinal value as well as, I mean, cosmetic value, but it's very, very tough to actually separate from all the 111 chemicals that are out there in cannabinoids.
Yes,
But
I would say that
yeah,
terpenes as a group of compounds are not so rare, but it's quite challenging to find
yes,
some very specific ones with the specific bioactivities, and again combining them, because what we have seen that there might be an option to use pure compounds or isolate pure compounds, but and I think in scientific publications from other fields also there's coming in information that usually actually you need a mixture of those
yeah, it's
compounds, especially plant secondary metabolites, because they act synergistically.
yeah,
So the individual compounds have some bioactivity, but in the mixture, they often have a synergistic activity, so increase the effects that you're targeting.
makes sense. I think, I mean, in the cannabinoid context, it was termed as entourage effect. That, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if they travel together, that's when they have the real effect as compared to individually. And that's very interesting. And I never knew that terpenes have such kind of effects, and they're found in the coniferous forests
Mm-hmm.
and trees.
Yeah, but it's a mixture. It's from other phenolic compounds and phenolics, but
Yeah.
there are two specific molecules that are we always find them in that cell line. So when reaching higher concentrations, we really see those beneficial effects.
Understood. Now, there was another question that was coming up in my mind, Anna. That was, you have so much research and knowledge working on the plants, their characterizations, the synthesis, so on and so forth, and the scalability portion also. And then there is the business model, which is B2B right now for you guys.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And is there a plan where you may think of producing over the counter products
Mm-hmm.
and doing it yourself? At the
So
time,
I
you don't
think
have to go
this
through the regulatory bodies also.
this is a topic that comes like on the list in every quarterly team meeting, I think so. But currently, I think it's good for companies to be focused where they are strong. So, as I mentioned, our like me and my co-founders' previous experiences working in the B2B. So, and currently also, I think we're strong in communicating with the formulators, R&D people in cosmetic companies, marketing people in cosmetic companies. Also, we're like a bridge in translating that science and how to communicate the product. But at the same time, we don't have such good competency in formulating the final product and marketing the final product. So
Yeah,
this
that
is
makes sense.
something. It's very interesting, and it's something I think definitely at some point we will try like a B2C product. But at this stage, we're focusing to B2B because we feel that they really have the competency and we can provide all the scientific data, testing data. And then there are people in between the user of the cosmetic product and us, the manufacturer, who puts it all in the formulation, where also a lot of competencies is needed. And also their marketing people that know the best how to communicate that to the user, to the
That makes
end
sense.
customer.
That makes sense. I think I was over enthusiastic hearing about the components and the compounds, and I think, I mean, you may be too. But nevertheless, I really wanted to inquire about the origin story of alternative plants. I mean, what was that moment that told you that, hey, I mean, we should start this?
Mm-hmm.
Was that a long-standing observation that you had, and then you entered into it? Was it some specific event? Was it a personal kind of realization? What was it?
Yes. So no, for more than some 12 or even 15 years, we have experience like doing those biological activity tests. We provided some consultations to our cosmetic companies. So I think the turning point was that we collaborated in research projects with local, one of the leading local cosmetic companies. And we always love to see the science in the shelf of pharmacy or any like convenience store or cosmetic store or salon. And that was a turning point, that there were some ingredients and formulations and combinations that we were testing for them, and they were very successful, and they quickly turned out that they started to manufacture the product, and the product was actually on their web page. You can buy it, so you see your science translated in the actual product.
Yeah.
But that was the research done for the company. That's nothing to do with the ingredients. Then we started to dig in what the industry is lacking, because each year we see launches of new ingredients, but still the industry is looking for something new. And we realized, yes, that there are biotech products that at that time, 7 years ago, there were a few on the market, and this inaccessibility, that there are some compounds that are produced in plants at slow quantities, and there are even medicinal plants that are difficult to access, they're difficult to grow, they're found in very specific habitats. So, and then we came up with the idea that we could grow the cells of those plants, not the plants themselves. And it took a lot of time as in playing around. We were not very familiar with the technology, so we knew the basics, the science, but of course to do that at a larger scale, it was quite a struggle. Actually, the first cell line that we thought will be the most promising one, we threw that away. It didn't work. It took us half a year testing and playing around, but it didn't work. From today's perspective, maybe we actually did something wrong, and the protocol of cultivation should be different. But still. And yes, and the next turning, and that was a turning point when we decided, let's try it, let's establish the company. And how we started, we applied. Actually, before establishing the company, we applied for the Biotech Accelerator that was organized by one investor, the investor that actually invested twice in our company. So, and that gave a push that they believed in us, and that made us more believe in ourselves and in the technology. So we started with one cell culture, but then in parallel, very soon we had already 3 different. We played around with the growth conditions, tried to scale something. And the next turning point is when we started testing the bioactivity. So how the compounds we get from the cells actually work. And then we started to see the effects. So it was not very drastic like changes, but we still saw that there was an ingredient that promoted cell growth, that promoted collagen synthesis. You see already some effects, and then you start digging deeper how to improve that, how to get the ingredient better, and then the snowball starts rolling. So here we are today.
So there were always rays of hope in your research points that made you go forward and try this out. That's interesting. And I think maybe that's true for most of the research intensive startups that would be out there. Because I mean, it's like you mentioned, I mean, it's not something drastic that will change and that will happen, and then you suddenly get a eureka moment. I mean, that usually does not happen in research intensive startups. That makes sense, and then that's a good story to actually understand for our audiences. Also, they understand what starting a company in biotech domain means. Now, Romania, I mean, I do not know a lot about the country and the startup environment. So, I mean, can you give us an idea as to, I mean, of course, there was the biotech accelerator there, but I haven't heard of a lot of companies coming out of Romania. Maybe I'm very
from
ignorant.
Latvia. I'm from Latvia. I'm not from
sorry.
It's quite fun. So yeah, Alternative Plants is based in Latvia, in Riga. That's the capital. It's one of the 3 Baltic countries, so on the coast of Baltic Sea. When we started 7 years ago, there were some like group, I would not say even companies, groups of people with crazy ideas. But of course, we were struggling initially because there was a lack of support. There was little experience in collaboration between the big universities, big research groups, and such small companies. Now I think it's getting better because the academia understands more that even from such small companies, something very nice, very good and growing can come out. So that was one point that we saw actually more that in other companies that there were struggles. They need some scientific competency. They struggle to find and to collaborate because researchers usually they want big science projects. They want to study, research, test, but the startup needs to quickly get to the solution. So it's always to find something in between. For us, it was easier because we founders, we came from the academia and we had like contacts. We knew where to go, what competencies to ask. So we had that experience. Funding wise, also the investors. So, and I think it's still, and I think it's globally even, that of course investors are more interested in where you can get back your investment in 3-5 years. In biotech, it's 10 or even more. Especially in some industries like the cosmetic industry, and I think it's the pharma food, maybe it's shorter, but the sales cycle is very long. So especially for B2B, because the companies and the larger kind of company, it takes longer time to make a decision to test our ingredients, and we fully understand that. And once they're starting to use the ingredient, actually the first orders may come even after 6 months after that, or a year after, like already the agreement is, or so yeah, it takes from delivering the sample and starting like investigating the potential business case. It can take a year or even 2 years. Like but that is the sales cycle. So that's quite challenging. And of course, at the early stages, you need the funding to run the company and to scale up the technology. And back when we started, there were a few investors that understood biotech in our region. So the focus was more on information technologies, SaaS, software applications, fintech, edtech. So, and it's understandable. So you get back your investment if the company is successful faster. So, but we were successful to the accelerator where we participated was not the local. It's an international, and it was not located in Latvia. So we went for some period abroad. There was a possibility to work in a laboratory there as well. So, and more companies started to look for investors, not regionally, but globally, to look at those accelerators and investors who invest not in specific geographies, but in all the Europe or even globally. So, and there, if you have a good idea, if you have a good founding team, and the team, I think, is even more important, because if you have a good team, you will pivot and you will develop, you will overcome the challenges. So they will believe you, and whenever it doesn't matter which geography maybe you are at that point. So there might be some like exceptions, but still. So and then there are several companies who attracted such like small investments, and that I think raised also awareness among the regional local investors that it's worth investing in biotech. So it's getting better, and like the benefit of operating in Europe, in European Union, that there are a lot of public grants, like European grants, and we also we did not initially put a lot of focus on attracting like venture capital. We put an effort to attract those public grants. They do not take an equity in the company, but you have the money for those very expensive R&D activities. So, and we have had, I think, 3 or 4 even. So those grants that helped us to develop the cell lines and helped us also with the scaling. So it's, I would encourage everyone in Europe to use that opportunity, because it allows not only to finance the R&D activities, but it allows you to build the connections with academia as well, because in those projects, usually companies are not on themselves doing the R&D activities. They're collaborating with universities, scientific institutes, and other.
It makes sense. I think you are the second founder who talked about the public grants and public funds
Mm-hmm.
available in Europe. And I think, I mean, that's a very smart strategy, and that's a solid strategy, getting the connection as well as access to research
Mm-hmm.
that's already happening in the academia also. Now, one of the things because of which people are discouraged is the lengthier process of getting those grants and going through
Mm-hmm.
the channels as compared to the VC. And also,
Mm-hmm.
VCs have experiences on the industry side where they can
Mm-hmm.
scale, they have connections on the supply chain side, so on and so forth. So people prefer to go to somebody who may have already got some experience doing the same thing
Mm-hmm.
that we are trying to do. But that's solid suggestions for people on the research intensive side to actually use the
Mm-hmm.
public grants that are available.
Yeah.
I'm still gathering courage to ask you the next question after embarrassing myself. So
Good.
but I think you talked about the early stage challenges and
Mm-hmm.
the early stage thought process, the importance of teams, so on and so forth. But maybe if we move to what's in the future, so what are
Mm-hmm.
the two things that your focus area right now, Anna, in terms of alternative plants?
So the main focus part is to build partnerships with distributors. So when as we are operating in B2B, we have two channels how to reach out to our customers and to sell to them. So one is directly to cosmetic manufacturers, the other is through distributors. And we have tested both channels, and currently the most successful for us are distributors. Local distributors, not very global, but there might be some exceptions. But those that really know their market, that really
Mhm.
know, and this industry, it seems like a very cosmetic industry is very innovative, but still it's very traditional in a way that like the local personal connections they play a role. So the connections that distributors in some countries, for example, they have built for decades with the manufacturers, so they can benefit us. So we are mainly working right now with distributors. So we have agreements with several across different geographies, and to educate them more about how to sell our products, because we have identified our own like unique selling points,
Yeah.
what should be emphasized in communicating with the cosmetic manufacturers, all the aspects of technology, the bioactivities, performance of ingredients, sustainability aspects. So all that we do a lot of training, like raising awareness about the technology itself, but as well as in the same time more specifically about our product. So just in short, so the main focus is in building partnerships and facilitating the use of our ingredients in the actual cosmetic products. And the other thing is we're confident about the bioactivities of our ingredients. So there is still an R&D part going on with where we do dermatological testing with contract research organizations that do dermatological testing, where we look not at the safety aspects that has been tested already, but we look at how actually in the groups of panelists, how the ingredient works. If we see something in laboratory test, how it is really actually translated in really real people like using the cosmetic
Yeah.
products. And of course, now during those years, as I mentioned, each cell line is a little bit different with little different growth conditions and scaling protocols, but we have that experience already. So we see that this technology can be scaled not only in the volumes, but this technology can be scaled to produce much more ingredients. So we're working also to expand our product portfolio. That means that during summer already we have the samples, we have played around the protocols. We're working to get 2 to 3 more new cell lines. So hopefully after a year you can see on our webpage and maybe in some cosmetic products already some more other cell culture derived ingredients with again some other specific bioactivities.
Understood. I think that's very logical in terms of next steps. And I mean, this is a personal question that I wanted to ask, personal for me, in the sense that whenever I look at a tech company, and especially in the biotech space, I always try to understand how it would eventually turn out will when in terms of technology. So for example, cosmetics, which is directly to customers, I can understand that they have a vision. What is the vision in terms of tech companies operating in biotech such as yours? I mean, what is it that you ultimately want to become if you keep on growing, if you keep on growing your product portfolio, if you keep on growing your distribution channels? What is it that ultimately is your vision in terms of where does it go?
uh, um, the top version would be to be one of the leaders in the plant cell derived ingredients. But we're trying to look also broader because we're seeing how the biotech processes can be applied to cosmetic industry. So it might be not only like plant cell cultivation, it could be microbial fermentations and biorefinery approaches and etc. So, but we want to be in this B2B scene, like a well-established, well-known, respected brand, also as a brand, that the manufacturers know that what we provide, that if we promise some bioactivities, that they can be sure that the ingredient will have the bioactivities. And we want to be known for our competency, not only to produce ingredients, but what we're doing right now is also to provide like hints and ways how to formulate, how to include in the products to really bring to the end user, to the cosmetic user, the customer, the product that will meet their needs. Maybe those needs can be even personalized. That's the growing trend in the cosmetic industry as
Yes.
well. Because what we do already right now, we are improving that competency again when we work with distributors and we have like mutual meetings with the manufacturers. They often ask, you have a nice ingredient, can we use together with, I don't know, hyaluronic acid or some vitamins, etc. So we're building also that competency. As I meant, there can be synergies between different ingredients. There can be antagonistic effects as well. So we want to promise that our ingredients work, but we want to provide the competency that what you can combine with some other ingredients in your formula, that really your customer is satisfied and he sees the effects and what he's waiting for, what he's looking for.
Understood. Understood. That makes sense. And who knows? I mean, your know-how and your consulting becomes much more valuable than your product portfolio in the future, because that's where the industry is going. But
Yes.
nevertheless, Anna, I think there is one last question that I wanted to ask you before we wrap up, and that's related to the IP, the patents side of things. Now, you are in an industry where when this matters, people would want to protect this novel process, characterization, the cell culture lines, and how, the protocols that you were talking about. I mean, those should be protected. So, what, according to you, as a startup founder, as somebody who is operating in a research-intensive space, is patents or is IP in terms of its significance?
IP is very important, and we have a patent. We have the first ingredient that we, after patenting, launched to the market. We have patented it. That includes the technology, how we grow the cells, and where the ingredient and which cosmetic applications it can be used. But in general, my opinion is not that not every ingredient needs to be patented. What is more important for us, we always look into freedom to operate. That's when we started development, we look at the plant species, where it's used, is it used in some biotechnological processes. So if there is a freedom for us to operate globally or on some specific regions, it depends case on case. And regarding, so we have one patent, but there are some technologies and some aspects of technologies that we keep as a trade secret. So that's a confidential information. We do not disclose that. I think for startups, even the science and technology intensive startups, they have to evaluate also what specifically they want to protect if they're patenting something. And what happens, because we can read the patents are public. So what will happen in the case where when you see that someone like uses something very similar, will you be able to prove that? And in biotech processes, I think it's different from the pharma, where you have a very specific, like single pure compounds in most of the cases. But in biotech, this our approach is that some part of those complicated cultivation processes we keep as a trade secret, because there are a lot of variations, and it will be very difficult for us to prove that someone is like using the identical one. And it's vice versa. It's maybe somebody is using the similar protocol, but for the completely different cell line. That might be the case. So it's worth considering each case. Is it worth patenting? Because how how easy it is to replicate, first of all, and how easy it is, how many steps it has, and how easy it would be in a case of breach, to easy and expensive to prove that someone is using your information. So we kept it as a trade secret. Of course, we case by case, after analyzing freedom to operate, we analyze the patentability and is it worth how which ingredient to patent or not. So but patents, they are needed. They are needed. If you talk with the cosmetic companies, it's like they also like that they buy something unique, and there won't be after a couple of years hundreds of companies like manufacturing the same as their glycerin suppliers, a lot of them, and you can choose whatever. They want to be unique. And of course, it's important when you're fundraising for investors that your IP is protected.
So I think
And
for
the
me,
trademark still in the B2B area also, I see in this field, in cosmetic industry, we have also trademark registered. So this is something that I would also, it's cheaper than patenting and easier to say, but it's also something that I would encourage to sing other startup founders. So the building also the brand, even if you are in a B2B area.
Understood. So if I were to summarize, trademarks are on the branding side. That gives you an identity, that protects your identity. That's easier, that's faster. And there is a fine balance between patents and trade secrets. Usually things that you'd want to protect, that gives you an edge, that has a lot of variations and it's not easy to protect. Those are things that you'd want to keep in-house as a trade secret. And if there is an opportunity of a novel ingredient that comes up more often than not, then you would want to protect it as a patent. And otherwise, mostly the importance of IP is that you do not step on anybody else's foot. If there are patents existing, you figure out ways on how to go away from that. But that's a very well thought of IP strategy, Anna. And I think that was the last question that I had. And you look lovely, and it has been exciting talking to you. And thank you very much for your time.